All right, ladies and gentlemen, my special guest tonight is Max Blumenthal. He is, of course, the founder of The Gray Zone, investigative journalist. Let me go ahead and bring you in. Welcome back, Max.
Great to see you. Thanks for bringing me on and being so patient.
Great to see you too. While we were just talking about the fires, I don't know, do you know anybody in LA? Because I know you still live out there a little bit.
A close friend just lost everything. Just had to put up a GoFundMe. And yeah, other friends are trying to wait it out, getting evacuation orders one minute, and then the next minute being told, everything's fine, stay where you are. And they have as much of their belongings as they can fit in their cars. So yeah, it's an apocalyptic scenario. And once this passes, I think everyone living in LA will have to be ready for the next one.
I think so too. Yeah, it's pretty bad. I was just telling everyone, I spoke to Kim Iverson yesterday and she said they were fine so far, but then she just posted on Twitter that it looks like they may have to leave too.
Yeah, no one knows what to expect next based on my conversations with people out there. Anyone who lives anywhere close to the hills is in danger of losing everything. And yeah, so shout out to everyone in LA. Like, I can't imagine what you're going through. Everyone except James Woods.
I made fun of him today. Yeah, he's ridiculous. He has some nerve.
Yeah, it's karma. Well, I mean, is it karma? It's not like he's going to have like amputation operations with no anesthesia while watching his children get slaughtered. But that's what he wished on the people of Gaza.
You're right. You're right. All right. Well, speaking of that, Max, you wrote an article recently. I want to go ahead and bring this up here on the screen. Leaked emails expose collaborative efforts between the Israeli government and the Center for Countering Digital Hate. And you said here that these emails were obtained by the Gray Zone. It reveals how leading anti-hate campaigner Imran Ahmed collaborated with Israeli embassy officials to censor pro-Palestinian social media accounts. I want to get into that, especially since I just heard this announcement from Mark Zuckerberg that I guess Facebook is going to loosen up their censorship. Interesting, that's happening now that a new administration is coming in. But anyway, I want to hear a little bit more about this because earlier on, not too long after October 7th, you guys did sound the alarm that they were censoring pro-Palestinian content on social media. I would say also kind of on YouTube too, but go ahead.
Well, this story is wild for a lot of reasons. One is that Elon Musk is currently at war with this group, CCDH, the Center for Countering Digital Hate. Such a humbly titled organization. They're just fighting hate. They're just against hate, and we need to stop hate. Who could disagree with that? But he's been Imran Ahmed, first of all, let me finish that thought about Elon Musk. He's at war with Elon Musk. Elon Musk is accusing him and his organization of foreign interference, wants to destroy him. Emails were exposed by Matt Taibbi and Paul Thacker, internal emails showing that he had a plan to kill Elon Musk's Twitter, obviously on behalf of like the Biden administration. And now Elon and his Trump allies are accusing this organization of foreign interference because Imran Ahmed came over from the UK and was very close to Keir Starmer. He's a very close ally of Keir Starmer. The founder, the original director of this organization became Keir Starmer's chief of staff. So I dropped this piece showing that not only is CCDH and Imran Ahmed, who was a British Labour Party operative from the part of the Labour Party that destroyed Jeremy Corbyn, not only was he, a British operative, but that he was working directly with the Israeli embassy in DC to censor pro-Palestinian accounts and specifically like Palestine activist groups that organize on Facebook. And the Israeli embassy was hooking him up with donors, and he was letting them vet his reports before they went out. And I showed this through emails in like, it couldn't have been clearer. And I confirmed that the emails were real with Imran Ahmed and an Israeli embassy official who I got on the phone. You would think Elon Musk would just be going crazy with this right now, but he hasn't said anything about it. And if anything, like, the story's been suppressed through the algorithm on Twitter, which just shows how owned Elon Musk is by Israel as well.
Yes.
I mean, so that it reveals so much about the way things get done in Washington. Even if you kind of get lost in the weeds of the details of this story, like, here you have a fake anti-hate campaigner who is fighting disinformation. You know, this is one of the big grifts of the establishment now. And the Israeli embassy is telling him, he goes to them and asks, like, basically for money. He's just like, give me money and I'll do whatever you want. And they're like, we'll hook you up with some philanthropists. And that shows you how the Israeli government does business in this country and in Europe, which is that there'll be some wealthy, quote unquote, Jewish philanthropist who's actually an Israeli government asset shelling out money, but the Israeli embassy is giving them the instructions on who to give the money to. And that's not considered foreign interference at all. It's just how that's business as usual. So there's a lot in this story that just shows how corrupt our system is, but especially how corrupt this disinformation racket is.
Are you surprised? I know when Elon did decide to buy Twitter and renamed it X, he was really on like this free speech bandwagon. And I think a lot of people bought into that. And then the moment October 7th happened, people started to notice, wait a minute, like, they're suppressing Palestinian content or anything that was pro Palestinian. And then Elon took that trip to Israel, didn't go to Gaza, of course. And as time went by, more people are saying Elon is not pro free speech after all. Now he's saying that he's going to change the algorithm to promote positive content, whatever that means, whichever he says is positive. Are you surprised that Elon is willing to go along with what Israel wants as well, even just for this platform?
No, I did an hour on that very question yesterday on our live stream with Patrick Henningsen, because he's, I think, one of the few people following this critically, who really gets what's going on. But if you understand the system that we're in and we're entering, I mean, we're going from kind of neoliberal capitalism into techno-feudal oligarchy, where just a few billionaires, like a cartel of billionaires, will subject us to their whims. And that is what Elon Musk is, why he bought Twitter. He's going to sell it for a massive IPO, but he bought it to control the narrative. And when he bought it, I knew who he was. I knew what he was bringing to the table. I knew he was a kind of a technocrat figure who believes in transhumanism, who is eccentric in the extreme, names his children for quadratic formulas, likes to donate his sperm to as many female employees as possible to perfect the human race, only impregnates his girlfriends through IVF for whatever reason. And it's just a bizarre character, but I supported it because the previous regime in Twitter under, the top censor Yoel Roth was crushing us and was forcing everyone to have these labels like, Bulgarian state affiliated media, everything the disinformation industry wanted, they were doing. And I don't think I would have survived after October 7th, questioning the mass rape hoax, questioning even the 40 beheaded babies hoax. And everybody was just getting suspended left and right. So Elon did open that up. The Twitter files were an important intervention just to show how much censorship was taking hold. And we got to see what was happening inside Twitter, but YouTube has really been the worst.
Yes.
Which is owned by Google, which is a military contractor. So what we're seeing with YouTube and what you face is more of like the deeply entrenched national security state and the whole financial system behind it exerting its force on content creators. So if we challenge the national security state and we talk about CIA activities or question, I don't know, a Syrian chemical attack, or we got a strike, and YouTube wouldn't even allow us to upload a video where we questioned who was behind the Majdal Shams attack in Israeli occupied Golan Heights in, I believe, October or September, because that was the attack that gave Israel the latitude to start attacking inside Lebanon, which led to the killing of Hassan Nasrallah and the destruction of Lebanon. And they needed something to like politically activate Israelis so they could expand the war into Lebanon. And that was it. And there was so much evidence that the warhead that was used was not something in Hezbollah's arsenal. I talked to people actually in the community who didn't believe it. We weren't even allowed to upload that video. So what I'm saying is YouTube is something much deeper, but the censorship you get from Twitter is because Elon Musk wakes up one day and gets pissed off that his own MAGA lackeys are slagging him for his support for the H-1B visa.
Yep.
And his desire to replace skilled white American labor with that of imported Indians working for less so he can increase his profits, and supporting Vivek Ramaswamy basically attacking white America for having too many sleepovers and not producing enough mathletes and worshiping Screech from Saved by the Bell. He got so mad, he actually called them irredeemable. What did he call them? Unrepentant racists. And this is one of the biggest unrepentant racists who's, on that right now, he's on a tirade about like days long bender about Pakistani rape gangs. He pivoted from supporting Hindu mathletes coming into Twitter's offices and taking over to like coding positions to portraying Pakistani youth as a bunch of savage rapists who need to be investigated in this mass inquiry in Britain, and supporting Tommy Robinson, who is like Israel-backed race thug, supremacist race thug. I mean, the Elon's swings are so wild, and we're just caught in between because we live in a techno-feudal system. We're at the dawn of a techno-feudal system. So he changed the algorithm to deprioritize what he calls negativity, which is the attacks on him for like selling out Trump's base. That's negativity, and more entertainment. He's going to get more entertainment. I haven't seen anything more entertaining on Twitter. I've seen like there's tons of like ads for butt enhancing jeans for men that I see. Like all kinds of X gear and sex toy ads. There's nothing entertaining that's been like put in my feed. And then when I go to For You, where they just like it's more like force you. Here's what we will force you to see. It's just every psychotic Zionist influencer talking about how all the dead children in Gaza are really Pallywood. So I don't know what happened with the algorithm, but it's just to defend himself, because his class position has been challenged by his own people. And now he's talking about taking over the UK, taking over the Reform Party in the UK to kick out Nigel Farage, supporting Tommy Robinson, removing Keir Starmer, supporting the AfD in Germany, taking over Greenland so he can get some of the $1.3 trillion of rare earth minerals there for his lithium batteries. And what else does he want to do? Oh, today now he wants to topple Nicolas Maduro again. He's supporting the CIA-backed arsonist Maria Corina Machado in Venezuela. He's having a megalomaniacal meltdown, and we're just subjects. We're like little medieval peons who are just like looking and trying to peer behind the walls of the castle to see what the Mad King is doing with his his sperm receptacle women and the weird babies they produce. Like, that's the world we're living in. Mark Zuckerberg, another figure. What did he do? He got rid of the fact checkers on Facebook because there's a new sheriff in town.
Yep.
And he doesn't have it like any ideology like Elon Musk. He's like part of the financial elite that just goes with power, kind of like Jeff Bezos. And Trump's in power, so there won't be censorship. If a Democrat came into power, it'd be censorship on steroids. Facebook would be funding all kinds of disinformation psyops. He's just, he's just so happy to be able to be in the room and be making billions of dollars. And again, I mean, it doesn't matter what we think or say in that world. So it's important to really be clear about what we're up against. And we're up against these billionaires. And at the same time, we can also benefit when they're like having a good day and decide like, oh, I'm going to let you speak.
Right. It's just a matter of when they're having a good day and how many good days they are going to have. But speaking of censorship, I don't know if you saw this. This video has been making the rounds on X. And this is Dwight Howard, NBA player. He brings up a moment during this interview where he was censored because of Palestine. Everyone listen to this.
So I tweet free Palestine. Less than 10 minutes after I tweet that, I get a call from the commissioner of the NBA.
Stop it.
Agents, people like working with my foundation at the time, Texas, you gotta erase this tweet. You gotta take this down. You're gonna get it. I'm like, what did I do that was so bad?
Can somebody explain to me?
Yeah, can somebody explain? And it was just like because I went against the grain. I said something that people didn't like, and I, now
not people didn't like, they didn't like.
So now it's like I gotta stand on what I believe and how I feel, and not go back on it.
Yeah.
And when you're in the league, you be in that place where if I say too much, or if I say something, I may not get a job no more.
That's that 70% of people that's out the league that got you.
I gotta hold my tongue.
Yeah. So that was Dwight Howard. And are you familiar with NBA, Max?
Is he still in the league? Because he's like almost my age.
I don't think so anymore. That's a good point. But you know who he is.
Yeah. Of course. He played on our scrub squad here in Washington for like a minute.
So that goes back to the censorship around Israel as well. And it's not just him. Like, remember, Kyrie Irving. A lot of people don't know this one, but here in Boston, the Boston Celtics, Jaylen Brown, there's a reason why Jaylen Brown was not on the Olympics basketball team. And people were asking me about that. Why is Jason Tatum and Holiday there, but not Jaylen Brown when he was the MVP? Because Jaylen Brown decided to stand with Palestine. A lot of people may not be aware of that. But how do you feel about Dwight Howard saying that the commissioner contacted him and told him you have to take that tweet down?
Yeah, I think he must not be in the league anymore if he's able to speak with that level of candor. The commissioner is Adam Silver, and the previous commissioner was David Stern. They're both Jewish. Most wealthy Jewish people in America are ideologically Zionist, or they have a lot of Zionist pressure on them because of the position they're in. So it must have been personal for Adam Silver, though I don't know his politics very well. The NBA is less, my understanding is the culture of it and the relationship between the commissioner and the players is less toxic and onerous than the NFL with Roger Goodell, who's just like this corporate hitman, where like the NBA always would bend to the players union when they wanted to smoke weed. Like, it was just, a lot of the players like to smoke weed, so they're not going to start banning them and destroying them like the NFL destroyed Ricky Williams and Warren Sapp, who were two players who had just Ricky Williams said he had like severe anxiety and he needed THC to help calm him down. Warren Sapp just got like caught with it in his system, and they like suspended him for a year. So the NBA's reputation is what I'm saying is you're dealing with a much more liberal culture. NBA fans tend to be more liberal, they support the Democrats more. And it's like the one forbidden thing is to say free Palestine. Meanwhile, the Miami Heat just had a night, like an official night for Israel. where crazy Zionist settlers were on the floor dancing to like Hebrew pop music and nationalist Israeli songs. The Miami Heat are owned by the Arison family, Sherry Arison and I think Ted Arison, who own Carnival Cruise Lines. If you are trying to do BDS, I mean, I don't know why you'd want to like go on that repulsive boat in the first place, but don't go on Carnival Cruise Lines. But you know, Israeli culture in the NBA is encouraged. And there was an Israeli player here in Washington on the Wizards. I forget his name because he was, you know, he was just like a body on the court that would just go up and down. But he was like, after October 7th, he was wearing an Israeli flag and like did all these ceremonies with the local Israeli diaspora, and the embassy officials came out to the court. And like, Palestine is just forbidden and in every institution in this country because it threatens power. And the Zionist power in the US is just generally threatened by Black people and their political potential, because it knows that they tend to identify with other oppressed people around the world. So it always has to punish them extremely harshly. If you look at like Black celebrities who've spoken up for Palestine and the amount of punishment they've received, like Danny Glover, for example, the amount of roles that cost him over the years, or even what happened to Kyrie Irving, who wasn't really saying anything about Palestine, but he published one like Black Hebrew Israelite video on Twitter that would have been like forgotten. But it contains some allegedly anti-Semitic themes. And he got shook down so hard by the Anti-Defamation League. They were going to basically run him out of the league. And in the end, in order to restore his good standing, he had to pay $500,000 to the ADL. I mean, and yes, he was left off the U.S. Olympic team. He's like one of the best jump shooters in NBA history. Scores, the natural scores, and he's not allowed on the Olympic team because of that. So this is, I mean, I think what you're showing me with Dwight Howard is emblematic of a much larger trend. And in the Israeli lobby, the Israeli government itself has invested so much money in cultivating athletes, especially Black athletes, taking them on free trips to Israel. Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, is a huge Zionist.
Yes.
And he takes all of his players, any player who wants to go on a trip to Israel, to like basically brainwash them, and took Tom Brady to like a shooting range. You know, the players generally they have no context for understanding the situation of Palestinians, and they just like to go on a free trip. Many of them grow up Christian, like they're Baptists, Southern Baptists, and so they think it's just going to the Holy Land, and they get brainwashed. The league, the NBA, like at the top, the culture is Zionist. On the floor, the culture is Free Palestine, except for a few Israeli players, and you know, it really makes it look like a plantation when they get treated that way.
It really does. And this is something else. Someone sent this to me. I was not aware of this. This happened in 2017. NBA apology for Palestine wording after Israel complaint. It says the NBA has apologized and removed wording from its website referring to Palestine occupied territory on Friday after complaints by an Israeli minister. This is crazy. Like, to the point where an organization or a state can be so powerful that they can shake you down to the point where you have to remove language from your website. And that is just absurd to me. Like, I can't imagine any other country having this type of power over the United States to say, we don't like something, you need to take it off your website.
Yeah, that's so amazing. I hadn't seen that story before, but I was just reading into the text, and the Israeli ministers, the social affairs minister, her name is Miri Regev. She's one of the biggest racists in the Israeli government. She's from Netanyahu's Likud party, and she headlined a literal anti-African race riot rally. And she screamed about like Sudanese people taking over our country. And then the crowd went and rioted in a neighborhood filled with African migrants in Tel Aviv and smashed their cars up. I did a documentary with David Sheen, who is, I think, the premier Israeli reporter covering this issue of anti-African racism in Israel. And it's called Israel's New Racism. We did it. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. It has like 4 million views. Somehow it hasn't been banned. And Miri Regev is just at the center of this anti-Black incitement in Israel. And now she's dictating to the NBA commissioner. I mean, that's, to me, shocking, but also in some ways predictable.
Well, it's like the story that was reported by The Guardian about they were sterilizing Ethiopian women in Israel against their will. And that story resurfaced again after October 7th. But all of a sudden people are like, oh, it's just the Palestinians. Like, no, they were sterilizing women against their will, like Ethiopian women.
Yeah. They, always, there's actually a book called what is it called? Birthing the Nation, I think it's called Birthing the Nation by Rhoda Kanane, who is a Palestinian academic whose family, they're Palestinian citizens of Israel. And it's about Israeli natalist policies. And Israel has always, had always traditionally since 1948 de-incentivized Arab or Palestinian women who are citizens of Israel from having children. They would come into their communities and give them lots of birth control education, family planning education. And early on, after 48 in Israel, David Ben-Gurion would hold a contest and give out cash awards for Jewish women who could have the most children. Because at its base, Israel is this racist, supremacist country that's engaged in a demographic trench war with the indigenous population, and they need to outpopulate them in order to win, which means, if you kill lots of them and bomb their children, bomb entire families, that helps you win the war. It's actually an unspoken reason why Israel is eliminating so many entire families in the Gaza Strip. There was a Zionist academic tied to the Israeli government from Harvard University named Martin Kramer, who referred to Palestinian males as superfluous young men in the Gaza Strip, economically superfluous. Like there's nothing that Israel could do with them and they can't get rid of them. So they're just there populating and making more children. And it's a nightmare for Israel. They have to deal with this somehow. The only way to deal with it ultimately, when you understand the logic of Zionism, is genocide. So we're looking at a genocidal project that is imposing its will on our own society and our own culture and on the NBA, which is, obviously an oppressive institution to begin with.
That's right. And then there's new news that came out. And I know you probably already saw this and you're probably saying, I told you so. But this was recently announced. No rape allegations filed from October 7th reveal Israeli prosecutor. This is huge, you guys. If you haven't heard this, Israeli authorities have admitted that no allegations of sexual assault have been filed from the October 7th cross-border infiltration by Palestinian resistance factions, despite extensive investigation. And you go here, it says that Maureen Gass, she went on to say, in the end, we don't have any complainants. What was presented in the media compared to what will eventually come together will be entirely different. So, Max, I'm pretty sure you're doing a victory lap here because you and, of course, Electric Intifada, and I believe Mondaweiss also called this earlier on, that there was no evidence of this. And now they're finally admitting that there's no evidence of this and there's no allegations.
Well, they've admitted it again and again in various ways, but I can't call it a victory lap because they got the genocide they wanted out of it. They got the consent from the Western leadership, particularly liberal leaderships in Brussels, London, Washington, that they wanted. They got the bombs. And now that they've destroyed 80% of the Gaza Strip, they can declare, oh, well, actually, we didn't have any survivors. There was no testimony. There was no, in the precise words of the Israeli prosecutor, there was no chain of evidence. And that's what we've been saying from the beginning. Because if you're going to bring an allegation that is so titanic and so explosive, you might as well have one piece of evidence. And they didn't have one piece of evidence. They have thousands and thousands of hours of footage and forensic evidence from October 7th, and they couldn't produce one single piece of evidence to support the claim of a systematic campaign of sexual assault by Hamas. It's so cynical. It's such a colossal psyop. And none of the stories that appeared in the New York Times on the front page, the Washington Post, in the Israeli press, or any of the articles attacking me in the Israeli press, me by name specifically, or in the Washington Post, 2 articles were published attacking me and attacking the gray zone. None of it's been corrected, retracted. There's been no acknowledgement. So it feels kind of like we're just living in a separate reality.
So when Piers Morgan, who's continuing to say this, that yes, there was sexual assault on October 7th. I've seen the video footage. What is he talking about?
He's talking about, a bunch of brown guys ran across the border and were yelling things. And there were women who were taken hostage, who were mostly Israeli female soldiers who are so-called spotters for the Gaza division. And they were handled roughly because that's what happens when you kidnap people. And they were used as collateral. Again, once again, there's no evidence that any of them were sexually assaulted, sexually abused. There's no video of it. But Piers Morgan, he just gets the vibe because he feels like, well, that's just what those people do or what they would do. Or maybe he just hangs out with so many British pedophiles. He thinks like that's what everybody does. But what we do have evidence of is very clear evidence out there. Video evidence, testimonies, and confessions of Israeli soldiers anally raping Palestinian men in the Sde Teman concentration camp in the Negev desert. And you would think this would be like the scandal of the year, but there's no front page stories about this. There's no, Jake Tapper's gonna do a special investigation, lisping his way through innuendo and distortions of half-truths, with a sad basset hound face to give you the feeling like that a mass rape occurred on October 7th. That's not happening. There's no Dana Bash acknowledgement. Israel had riots across the country in support of the soldiers who were going to be put on trial for anally raping Palestinian men on camera. Military bases were invaded. The Ministry of Defense, I think, was taken over briefly, like January 6th style, by these rioters. Members of Netanyahu's cabinet spoke out in support of the rapists. Netanyahu's son, who's on permanent vacation in Miami, next door to the future home of Vladimir Zelensky, he spoke out in support of the rapists. And it's like, it's all there. It should be like the biggest scandal, and the US media won't touch it. And now Pramila Patten, who was the United Nations Special Rapporteur on gender-based violence, something like that. She had already gone to Israel to investigate the Israeli allegations against Hamas. She wants to go back, and they won't let her. Israel won't let her do a proper investigation because it's afraid that she will look into the documented evidence of rape against Israeli soldiers. So that should tell you everything you need to know about this whole scenario.
And by the way, today, for those who are not aware, 45, I told you again, they work together with Israel. 45 Democrats voted with Republicans to prevent the ICC from having any type of warrant against Benjamin Netanyahu. Like, that's what they're prioritizing right now legislatively, like not the wildfires, not American people, but protecting Benjamin Netanyahu. That just happened today.
Yeah, I mean, you would expect Republicans to prioritize deregulating industries and helping out fat cats, but Netanyahu took priority here. and foreign country and took priority for the America First Congress led by Mike Johnson. This was like the first piece of legislation in the new session of Congress. Am I right?
Yes.
And the last piece of legislation, it was introduced at the end before the winter recess, and this is the first thing they voted on.
Yeah,
and it really shows you what the top priority of the House GOP and some of the Democrats is as well. And I wish there was like a kind of clever 3-letter acronym that would help explain the occupied government that we live under, but I don't want to get accused of being a self-hating Jew, so I just won't even go there.
Well, it shows you like what we're headed for. Like I said before, they really do put American people last. I mean, I just think about the lag in response to the fires that happened in Lahaina. And then now we have the wildfires in the LA area. I mean, this is a very immediate pressing issue, but their first thought is how can we help protect Benjamin Netanyahu? So all of these people are like bought and paid for. And then that brings me to this one, because Donald Trump is on his way to the White House. He did give a statement recently about Gaza and about the hostages. Everyone listen to this.
All hell must be paid if they don't release the hostages.
Well, do I have to define it for you? Look, all hell will break out. If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out. I don't have to say anymore, but that's what it is. And they should have given them back a long time. They should have never taken them. They should have never been the attack of October 7th. People.
Okay. So that was the statement that came from Donald Trump. Again, it's not surprising to me. I don't think it's surprising to you at all. But do you think that this negotiation that they're supposedly working on is going to happen before the presidential inauguration, which I believe is January 20th? Do you believe that's going to happen before Trump takes office? And if not, where do you see this going?
I can't get involved in predictions. I don't bet on things. I saw Delta Airlines is now going to allow you to do like sports gambling on planes now. I think that's something I'll just never get involved in. But I understand the dynamics at play pretty well. And, if you want to make a prediction, consider that Hamas has never been cowed since October 7th, despite having the full force of one of the most vicious, sadistic, and powerful militaries in human history thrown at it. And that its leader, the mastermind of this whole strategy of October 7th, which was all about getting Gaza out of the siege and preventing normalization between Israel and the Gulf states and preventing the demise of the Palestinian struggle. Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, how did he go down? He didn't go down hiding in a bunker surrounded by hostages as Netanyahu and all these Israeli jackals said he would. And he didn't go down selling out his people. He went down fighting in the field with his men with nothing but a pack of Mentos to eat. Autopsy showed he hadn't eaten in 3 days. He was experiencing the same suffering as everyone else in Gaza. Wasn't some billionaire. And his final act was to throw a stick at an Israeli quadricopter with his right arm blown off by a tank. And now it's much harder to negotiate without a figure like Yahya Sinwar there, because there isn't one single figure to talk to who has spearheaded the entire operation. But that just is symbolic of the attitude of Hamas, which is that they're not going to be broken until their terms are met. And they would always conclude their communiques to the public in Gaza with something that actually American revolutionaries said, like Patrick Henry, liberty or death. They would always say freedom or death. And that's what so it doesn't matter what Donald Trump says. They've already lost 80% of their homes. over 50,000 are dead. We're seeing human misery on an unprecedented scale. And Hamas is still in the field, along with many other resistance factions in Gaza fighting. And the Israeli soldiers are still taking losses in Gaza. And it's going to continue until a real deal is put on the table. Hamas agreed to a ceasefire in May. I actually interviewed a senior Hamas Politburo member, Osama Hamdan, in November. And he said, we have already agreed to terms. We did. And I said, did this happen in May? He said, yes, in May. And we agreed again. And Hamas also offered to release all hostages or all captives in mid-October, so long as Israel did not invade the Gaza Strip. We saw good faith negotiations actually succeed in delivering in very good health and good spirits half of the captives and hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. But this was so humiliating to Israel that they couldn't allow it to happen again. So it really depends on whether Trump wants to twist Benjamin Netanyahu's arm, because Netanyahu is the real obstructionist in addition to being the arsonist. And here's a interesting clue into Trump's thinking, and I'm not going to read too much into it, but on Truth Social, Trump tweeted out footage of Jeffrey Sachs slamming Netanyahu as a dark and malign individual. I don't know if, Jeffrey Sachs made a lot of other comments. He criticized Obama. It's never clear what Trump is thinking.
Right.
But perhaps Trump has become frustrated with Netanyahu. One thing I can say about Trump is he doesn't want to have an open-ended conflict heading towards war, careening towards war with Iran at the beginning of his administration.
Well, I was going to tell you, I did read today that Netanyahu was supposed to come to Donald Trump's inauguration. He has now decided not to come. Do you think that's a sign of something?
It could be. It could also be a sign of Netanyahu's failing health. He just had a major prostate operation. Unlike people in Gaza, he had it with anesthesia, but this was a serious surgery for Netanyahu, and it could be cancer for all we know. I don't think it was just a urinary tract infection, as we were told.
Right. Very interesting. I would say this, because I do see a number of people on social media saying, we told you guys that Trump would be worse after that video went around. And my whole thing is that even if Kamala Harris would have won, I still think they still would have killed more Palestinian people. It would have been done more. And I think Trump is overt, and I think Kamala and Biden are, covert about it. Like they'll say some things that kind of make it sound like they have some type of sympathy for the Palestinian people. But along the way, all of them have agreed to basically give Israel what it wants, in my opinion.
Yeah. Remember when Trump vowed fire and fury would rain down on Pyongyang and the North Korean leadership if it didn't agree to his terms? That was Trump. And I'd actually seen Nikki Haley brag at a private meeting I kind of infiltrated. I saw her brag. This was Trump's UN ambassador, and I think she became Secretary of State. I can't even remember what she was. She was bragging about how she threatened to assassinate the Chinese leadership if they didn't back down on North Korea or something. This is all this very crude attempt to implement the Kissinger madman theory that Nixon employed, where you act really crazy at the beginning of negotiations and you threaten the person on the other side of the table with just doing something that's irrational, make them fear you. And then the terms they eventually bring to the table are more favorable and more elastic. And that's what Trump did. And then he wound up going and exchanging love letters with Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, and getting sabotaged by John Bolton. So he could be doing the same thing here. This is part of Trump's art of the deal. The difference is he's threatening a besieged faction of guerrilla fighters who will not be cowed. And it's unclear whether, and on the other side, he's being basically paid by an agent of Netanyahu, Miriam Adelson. So it's unclear whether he's actually going to be able to make a deal, even if he wants to. And yes, this genocide would still be continuing if Kamala Harris had won re-election. Plans to strike Iranian nuclear facilities were actually presented to Joe Biden by his national security director, Jake Sullivan, just a few weeks ago. And now we have to worry that Trump will execute those plans. But what we're seeing from Trump is continuity with, worse marketing techniques. As you said, he's more overt. The mask is off on the relationship between the U.S. and Israel, the special relationship under Trump. He embraces Netanyahu and doesn't pretend to be pressuring him like the Biden administration does, while it, hands him 2,000-pound baby buster bombs under the table. And not saying that I prefer that, but it isn't necessarily objectively worse. I think what I think Trump wants to do is something on almost every issue. There's continuity, including on tariffs against China, escalation against China. Trump hasn't come into office. The U.S. military is currently training Taiwanese special forces right now for an invasion. The U.S. military has been preparing to expand AFRICOM in Africa, hyping up the threat of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And Trump's going to do the same thing, but he's going to do it in a much more crude fashion.
Crazy stuff. All right, Max Blumenthal, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks as always for having me. Great seeing you.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.